Starting off number 10 now, we have Cropsey. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this one before. It's the story of the boogeyman of Staten Island. He was rumored to be a homicidal maniac who escaped from a mental asylum. He would hunt for children and drag them back to the ruins of a hospital where he lived. Witnesses always said that he had a hook for a hand. These stories were meant to scare kids, perhaps even told to them by their own parents who wanted them to be more wary of strangers. Then, in 1972, the boogeyman became real. News broke of a real-life corpsey man called Andre Rand. He was a former janitor at the local school for mentally disabled children. Rand was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome. He lost his job over the case and moved into the now abandoned school that he used to work in. He was eventually convicted of murder, and police connected him to the disappearance of 4 other children. No bodies were ever recovered. Moving on now to number 9, guys, we have the Bunny Man. I talked about this legend in my West Virginia video, if you remember. The story goes that in 1904 a mental asylum closed down. While transferring inmates to a new facility, one of the buses crashed. Most of the people in it were killed or captured trying to escape, but one actually did escape, known as the Bunny Man. He would then roam the land, hunting rabbits and then leaving their half-eaten carcasses for the locals to find. Sometimes they will be hanging from a tree or a bridge. Although there are parts of the story that just don't add up, something strange happened in 1970. A couple driving their car at night had an axe thrown through their window by a man in a bunny suit. 2 weeks later, another man found an axe-wielding guy in a bunny suit chopping wood nearby who was gone by the time police arrived. Are these linked together somehow? Is there more truth to this than meets the eye? Moving on now to number 8, we have the body under the bed. Ever since hotels and motels have become a common part of society, people have swapped stories about guests who discovered that the mattress they were sleeping on was either above or even stuffed with the body of a murder victim. A grisly tale for sure, but one that was confined to the realms of myths and legend. Then, in 1999, a case in Colorado occurred involving a couple who slept on a mattress containing a body. The police kept the details of that close to their chest, but in 2010 a huge story broke when guests at a Memphis motel discovered they had been sleeping above the body of Sony Millbrook, a missing person at the time. Her boyfriend, Lakeith Moody, was convicted of the crime. Many people were horrified and vowed to give their hotel beds a closer inspection next time. Next up at number 7 now, guys, we have the Maine Robber. That's M-A-I-N-E. The state. For many years, visitors to Maine's North Pond have reported that something strange was going on there. Time after time, people reported that things were going missing. Not just one person, one time, many people, many times. Batteries and food would vanish from cabins, while flashlights just disappeared from camping tents. People thought either the earth itself was swallowing it all up, or there was a thief at work. It turns out they were right about that. In 2013, a game warden discovered Christopher Knight living alone in the woods. For 27 years, this man had been there watching hikers, canoeists and other visitors to the area. When taken in for questioning, Knight admitted that he was responsible for around 40 robberies a year. I mean, stealing batteries is one thing, but I feel like if you were being watched all those years and then you were proven right about it, that would be even creepier. At the number 6 spot now, we have the Falling Lawyer. Now, I've lived in Toronto for quite a few years now, and I've personally heard this story floating around the place, but I never thought it was actually true until now. They say that years ago there was a lawyer who loved to show off how strong his office windows were in his building that overlooked the city. Every time someone came to visit, he would take a long run up, jump, and hurl himself right into the window. Sure enough, the window would remain intact, although we'll never know if this actually impressed his visitors. Well, this lawyer was real, and his name was Gary Hoy. He was a senior partner at his firm with an office on the 24th floor. On July 9th, 1993, some law students came to visit. He took his usual leap at the window, but this time, after years of it being weakened, it smashed. Gary plummeted to his death, and the improbable story became somewhat of a local legend. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Puebla's secrets. For many years, longer than people can even remember, the people of Puebla in Mexico have talked about the tunnels. Secret tunnels that were built under their city by the Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s. It's been almost half a millennia since then, and the stories became legend. People looked for them, but they found nothing. The tunnels became a myth, something to scare the kids into believing they there was a dark maze of caverns beneath them. In 2014, construction workers were in the middle of an urban remodeling project when they stumbled upon an old tunnel. Surely the legends weren't true. The Puebla History Center took over the site to investigate, and yes, it was the fabled tunnels people had spoken about. They determined the tunnels were built in 1531, right after the city was founded. Members of the Catholic Church supposedly used the tunnels to transport treasure and other property in and out of the city without people knowing about it. Part of the tunnels are now open to the public, giving you the chance to walk through the dark halls of an urban legend that came true. Coming in number 4 now, guys, we have the alligators. I definitely talked about this one in our New York urban legends video. Many years ago in New York, people would say that there were alligators in the sewers below the city. They said a young boy once flushed his pet alligator down the toilet. Years later, he reached into the sewer grate to retrieve a lost baseball. At that moment, a fully grown alligator leapt up from below and ripped his arm clean off, the same alligator he had flushed away. Many people dismissed the whole story. Alligators, New York, crazy. However, in 1959, Teddy May, the commissioner of New York during the time of these rumors, wrote about the alligators in his tell-all book. He said that he and his inspectors did find alligators in the New York sewers in 1935. They were up to 2 feet in size. It took 2 years for them to clear them all out, more than enough time for the facts to get blurred with fiction. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the dog boy. For many people in Arkansas, they know the stories of the dog boy. Kids swap tales of a werewolf-like man who roams around the town of Quitman. Some even say they've seen him. Many of them might not know that the story is somewhat based in real life. Gerald Bettis was born in Quitman in 1954. By the time he was a young boy, the neighbors were already calling him evil. They said he liked to capture stray animals and torture them in twisted experiments. As he got older, he turned on his parents, tormenting them until, at the age of 27, his dead father was found in his home. The newspapers said it was illness, but others said it was murder. Bettis then kept his mother in the house until she was finally taken away and placed in protective custody. His mother testified against him and he was given life in prison, where he died a few years later. They say that his spirit still haunts that house and that he's often seen roaming the area as a ghost on all fours with shaggy hair like a dog. And finally, number 1 now, we have Polybius. You may remember this from my video game Urban Legends video. Polybius was the name of an arcade game which kids in Portland got addicted to in 1981. Whenever they were forced off it, they felt nauseous, stressed, or even had seizures. Some people noticed the game was being serviced a lot more than usual. Instead of once a month, Polybius was being checked by men in black suits every single week. They would copy its hard drive, leave all of the money, and then be gone until the next week. People believed they were from the CIA, and that Polybius was all part of a mind control program that sent subliminal messages to its players. While a lot of this is debatable, there really was a kid who got sick during an arcade marathon contest in Portland in 1981. A few days after that, federal agents really did seize a load of arcade cabinets. They said it was all part of a major gambling bust. This is where people tend to differ in opinion. Some say that the story of Polybius was inspired by the events, others say the events are proof of the story. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the woman in black. Now, if you've ever watched any of my Urban Legends videos, you'll know that almost every country in the world seems to have a creepy story about a woman wandering along the side of the road and scaring drivers. Well, in 2014, it really happened. All along highways in Alabama, Georgia, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia, people started seeing a woman in black by the side of the road. She would always be wearing black willowy robes, dragging a small black bag and perhaps an umbrella if it was raining. Some people tried to talk to her, to offer her food, water, or money. She refused it all. Who was the woman in black? Well, eventually, people found out. She was 54-year-old Elizabeth Poles. Police took her to an undisclosed location for her safety, where they fed her and helped her find shelter. She later told ABC News that she wished people would mind their own business and that her long journey was related to her faith and religion. Now, sadly, this interview only brought even more attention to Elizabeth, although she eventually dropped out of the public eye and perhaps continued her long journey. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the body snatchers. In the 1960s, there was a rumor going around that governments were removing parts from the bodies of dead children and shipping them to secret labs in the US. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but it was totally true. When World War II ended with the US dropping the world's first atomic bombs, they wanted to determine the effects of nuclear radiation on humans around the world, specifically children who have been born since those bombs were dropped. It was called Project Sunshine. Over 1,500 bodies, many of them babies, were gathered from half a dozen countries from Europe to Australia in the 1950s for these studies. At times, the scientists would even ship single body parts taken from the babies without the parents even knowing. Coming in at number 8 now, we have Trick or Treat. For almost as long as Trick or Treat has been a thing, so too have the stories of nasty tricks of people putting dangerous things in the bags of little kids in order to cause them harm on Halloween. It sounds too horrific to be true, right? I mean, it's Halloween, it's supposed to be fun. In 2017 though, some parents' worst fears were confirmed when a mystery person allegedly dropped a small bag of crystal meth into the trick-or-treat bag of a toddler in Wisconsin. The Menominee tribal police chief said the child's father was going through the candy and he found a really small clear plastic bag about the size of a quarter. When the substance inside was tested, it was proven that the powder was methamphetamine. As a response, the local school banned students from bringing any candy to school the next day while an investigation continued. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Colonel Buck's cursed tomb. You can find Colonel Buck's tomb in Maine. He was a famous military leader in the late 18th century, but is mostly known nowadays for his tomb. Colonel Buck's was a Justice of the Peace. That title means he was a figure tasked with leading the local people and making sure justice and peace was always maintained. As part of this role, he is said to have ordered a witch be put to death by burning. The accused woman, in her dying breath, is said to have put a curse on his tomb that Buck had prepared for himself years before. When people looked at the tomb after, they saw a strange stain on it in the shape of a woman's leg. People said this was a sign of the curse and the leg was actually the witch's. Now, according to legend, the stone has been replaced many times, but this stain keeps appearing. This urban legend is 100% true, except I think for the stone replacing bit. I'm not too sure about that bit, but yeah, let's go with 99% true. Next up at number 6 now, we have Le Loyon. For many years, people in Switzerland spoke of a strange figure who stalked the Morlaix forest wearing a camouflage jacket and a vintage gas mask. The locals began to call him Le Loyon, and he slipped into urban legend. Then, in 2013, someone snapped an actual picture of Le Loyon. He was real. Locals searched for him all over the forest. Someone even found a camouflage boiler suit folded in the forest along with a letter from him. The letter said that the man was annoyed that the media had exposed him because his walks in the forest were part of his happiness therapy. He concluded the letter by saying, "I have concluded that the media has had two effects: deprive a person of his harmless outlet and make others feel insecure." Ever since the letter was found, Le Loyon has never been seen again. Poor guy. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Sunken City. All over the world, there are urban legends about towns and cities being submerged under the water. Perhaps the most famous example is, of course, Atlantis. Well, there is actually a real-life example of this in America, Lake Lanier. This is an artificial lake in Georgia that spreads out for 59 square miles. When the Army Corps began constructing the dam in 1950 to flood the area, people were already leaving. For those 5 years, the government bought up private land from farmers and townspeople so that they could be relocated elsewhere. The final count involved 250 families, 15 businesses, and 20 cemeteries, along with all the bodies buried there. The water ended up swallowing fields, bridges, gates, landmarks, a ferry business, roads, forests, and even a racetrack called Looper Speedway. These days, if you could walk along the bottom of the lake, which is 258 feet deep in some parts, you'd find a ghost town inhabited only by fish, swimming in the murky depths that humans once called home. Coming in at number 4 now, we have Catman of Greenock. In the Scottish town of Greenock, people talk for years about a strange man with no hair, covered in mud and dirt, who would be seen eating rats. If it sounds bizarre, that's because it was. The story spread across the whole area. People enjoyed it as nothing more than a creepy story, but then in 2007 things got very real. Someone uploaded this video of the Catman in real life chomping down on an actual rat. This was a shock to many people because stories of Catman have been around since the 1970s. However, since 2017, no sightings have been confirmed and Catman has slunk off again into local urban legend. Next up at number 3 now, we have E.T.'s burial spot. Now, from that title, you might think I'm about to tell you that E.T. wasn't just a movie, it was all real, and he died, and I know where he's buried. Now if that was true, it would be the story of the century. It's not that, but this is really interesting as well. Legend says that somewhere in the New Mexico desert, Atari buried copies of one of the worst commercial failures in video game history, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Why did that game fail? Well, it was clearly a cash grab deal with Steven Spielberg to make more money from one of the most successful movies at that time. They had just 5 weeks to make this game, and as such, it was rushed and sloppy and just rejected by the early gaming community. It also came during the 1983 video game crash. That didn't help. So Atari have millions of unsold games and decided to bury a lot of them in the desert. Well, this urban legend is 100% true, of course. In 2013, a documentary team excavated the rumored dump site and found hundreds of thousands of Atari cartridges buried in the desert. Many of them were of E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Next up at number 2 now, we have the medicine murder. For many years there have been urban legends going around about murderers breaking into people's houses by climbing through a bathroom cabinet. It's a creepy thought, a killer just squeezing into your bathroom in the middle of the night. It became such a popular urban legend that it inspired the 1992 horror film Candyman, which includes a scene where the main characters learn that a murderer might be entering apartments through the medicine cabinet. This actually used to be a major structural flaw in many American apartment blocks. Well, the nightmare became true in 1987. Back then, some housing blocks in Chicago had apartments that were joined with just a flimsy partition. An actual murder was committed by criminals who used this to climb through into someone else's apartment and commit a murder. The urban legend had become a movie, which has ended up becoming a reality. And finally, at number 1 now, we have Slave Master. Around the turn of the millennium, many people started receiving chain mail warning them of an instant messenger user called Slave Master, a serial killer who lured women to his house through public chat rooms. Sometimes he used names like Monkey Man 935 or Sweet Cali Guy Forever. Whatever his name was though, the email warned people that he had already killed 56 women. It seemed like an urban legend, and many of the details might have been embellished, but there is actually some dark truth to this story. In the 1990s, John Edwards Robinson was a serial killer from Kansas City who lured people to their deaths using instant messaging sites. His username was, of course, Slave Master. He remains on death row to this day.
Kicking things off, and at number 10 we have the impersonating police officers. There is an urban legend that has been circling for quite some time now about people who would dress up as police officers. They would pull people over, kidnap, or abduct them. This sounds absolutely terrifying because it's true. There have been reports of people dressing up as police officers so that they can attack their victims who let their guards down. In Illinois, a man used flashlights to get a woman to pull over, but after he walked over to her car, he tried to overpower her, but thankfully they got away. So basically, you should always be cautious when you're driving alone at night, and whenever a police officer pulls you over, if you don't see a legitimate badge, then you could be the next victim of this scary urban legend. Maybe you should ask the police officer for his license and registration. A corpse rotting in the water supply makes it onto our list at number 9. So you know how sometimes when you're staying in a hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, whatever it may be, the water might either smell or taste weird, but you still brush your teeth anyways. Me, I don't have a problem with that. I have no problems not brushing my teeth. Well, this next urban legend will make you want to reconsider. That's because a story about a dead body floating in the water supply is responsible for making the water turn brown or taste off. But as it turns out, this is more than just a story. This stuff actually happens. Back in 2013, guests staying at the Los Angeles hotel were complaining that there was a terrible smell coming from the water. So finally management decided to check the water tank, and to their surprise they found the body of a 21-year-old woman floating inside. It's estimated that her body has been there for over 2 weeks. Next up on our list, at number 8, we have medication being laced with poison. According to this urban legend, our over-the-counter medication might actually have some added ingredients that weren't on the label. Apparently some people used to lace Tylenol with potassium cyanate, which is an extremely deadly poison. After several people died, these deaths were known as the Tylenol murders. So you know how over-the-counter medication now has those tamper-proof seals? Well, it's because this urban legend turns out to be true, and a lot of people died, so the FDA had to step up their game. Escalators and chopped off feet slice their way into number 7. Do you guys remember when your parents told you to make sure that your shoes are tied before you went on an escalator? Well, I don't don't remember my parents telling me that. Well, it wasn't just to bother you or to annoy you. They might have been actually trying to save your life, or at least your foot. There was an urban legend circulating around about how your shoelaces can easily get stuck inside of the escalator and how you can get sucked in or chewed up alive. Well, there's some truth to this urban legend. Every year, nearly 10,000 kids are sent to the emergency room due to escalator-related injuries, ranging from mangled limbs to the occasional foot amputations. Think I'm making this up, Google it, but I don't recommend you Googling it because, oh man, the things on the internet that we see. So what is the moral of the story here? Well, I think you should be taking the stairs for the rest of your life. Unless you have shoes that you do not have to tie, in which, in this case, all I wear is shoes with no laces on it, because I'm lazy. Number 6 takes us to snakes living in the toilet. We've all been scared to open up the toilet lid only to discover that an angry animal is living inside of the bowl waiting to bite you. Well, if you've never been scared or checked the toilet bowl before sitting, you're definitely gonna wanna start checking it out from now on. Well, that's because there are so many stories about people finding strange animals hanging out in their toilet water. Someone found a 5.5 long snake, another person found a family of rats. I don't know what it was doing or how it got in there, and someone actually saw a possum.
Can you even imagine a snake in your toilet? It seems to be happening more and more.
Just when you thought you were in the privacy of your own bathroom, you're not alone. An animal could be lurking in the water waiting to make its move. Losing your arm during tug of war could actually be a thing, and this takes us to number 5. When we were younger, parents used to tell us that if we were too intense during a game of tug of war, we might lose our hands, fingers, or even an entire arm. Of course, we would just brush off those cautionary tales, but this terrifying urban legend is actually true. There are a ton of reports about adults and children losing their limbs while playing this game. And you know how some people wrap the rope around their wrists to help them win? Well, they are actually putting themselves in a lot of danger because it is so much easier to lose a hand this way. If all of these reports are true, then why the heck are we still playing this game of tug of war? I mean, game of tug of, you're gonna tug my arm off. I'm pretty sure no one even likes playing this game, especially if you're in the front and you're the one that has to fall in the mud. I mean, I'd rather be the guy in the back who's pretending to do all the work. And now at number 4, using corpses as decoration. With Halloween coming up, you might want to take a closer look at some of your neighbors' decorations or the decorations in haunted houses because, well, they could be real corpses disguised as fake dead bodies. According to the urban legend, some carnivals would run out of paper mache, so instead of wasting all of their time making new ones or making more of them, they would find a dead body and hang it in their haunted house in order to scare their customers. And I guess it looks more real? Well, that's because it is real. This actually happened back in the 70s. A criminal was embalmed and put on display for others to see. People would pay about 5 cents to see the corpse by dropping a nickel into his mouth. But one day, 2 people who claimed to be the dead criminal's brother took his corpse and hung him in their funhouse. People passing through the house didn't suspect that a real corpse was hanging from the ceiling until one day when someone went to move it and his rotting arm just fell off. At number 2. This is an urban legend about a teenager performing in a Halloween show. He really wanted to have a grand finale, so at the end of his act, he was gonna pretend to hang himself in front of everybody. But he ended up actually hanging himself in front of everybody and died because everyone thought it was just a trick. Well, sadly enough, there is truth to this urban legend, and it's happened more than once. People have been trying to replicate this stunt, but somehow they forgot to, not actually kill themselves. I'm just spitballing here, but if I was performing a trick like this, I would definitely take some precautions. For one, I wouldn't put a rope that is tied to a noose around my neck, and if I do, make sure you have the one person there who knows how the trick works, and if he sees, the trick not going according to plan, to come save my life.